Okay,
It's my
well,
privilege to have Antra on the IES platform. CCD is our ceramic center for ceramic design, and this is very important talk we can get to know about Antra. Yes, Antra.
okay. Thank you so much, Sandeep, and
Sure.
thank you all of you for this patient wait. Um, Before taking any more time, uh, I again just want to thank for this platform for this sharing. And like the title for this conversation is Trail Talk. And I'm just going to walk through this journey and take a few smaller trails here and there with a little bit of more experience in some. And if you have any questions with the ones that I don't take you deep down on that road, please let me know. I'll be very happy to share all that I know. So where I am right now is, okay, there we go. I am at the western part of United States, and at Utah State University. I'm presently the gallery coordinator here with a teaching load. So I'm teaching basic drawing. I'm at Utah State University, which
Right.
is in the western part of the US, as a gallery coordinator for what is called the Kane College of the Arts. And I have a teaching load. I'm teaching basic drawing this semester. And sometimes I get to teach 3D design. So that's what I'm doing here. Just for context, I would like to say that I'm at 41 degrees north
Okay.
latitude, while Bombay is here
Hmm.
on the latitude where Mexico City is, which is
Right.
19 degrees north.
Uh,
And Delhi is 23 degrees north. So I'm really in the temperate zone where I get all the four harsh seasons, just as a context.
yes.
And also, I am 6 hours behind Greenwich Mean Time, and all of you are 5.5 hours before. So you know that it's early morning here in Utah.
Good morning.
Yes. Okay, so going on to the next slide. I am inspired by the structures created by the golden mean and its various permutations that emerge and evolve from the micro of the organism to the macro of the universe.
Right.
My work is guided by clay itself. I'm molding clay, yet it is molding me. I try that my mind, body, and soul may work in concert in order to manifest the forms, which I then offer to fire. Continuing about my inspirations, I take you down my memory lane. I grew up in an industrial township. When I was in my teens, I could visit the steel plant.
Oh,
It may be difficult in today's time and date with the safety rules, but I was lucky and I got to see the blast furnace from where molten steel came gushing out into the channels to the steel melting shop. This image is of the slab rolling mill in the huge workshop where everything was mechanized and the ingot reheated was pressured between rollers for making it into the slab
slabs.
that you see in this image. I believe at that age, I made an emotional connection to the transformative power of heat.
Right.
My
Beautiful.
favorite artist, Richard Serra, whose larger than life works are made in metal. I have experienced several of his works. When one stands in that space, the feeling of contraction and expansion is an experience. I had dreamed of experiencing the work that we see in this image some 15 years before I finally came in rendezvous with it in October 2017 at San Francisco MoMA. I would like to share some thoughts by Kanjiro Kawai, who is a potter from Japan. He said, "We do not work alone. Man can make a bowl of clay. He can make it round and smooth, but until it is fired, it cannot be used. Man can lay the fire and light the flame, but still it is the fire itself that really completes the bowl. And that fire is something bigger and more wonderful than any man."
Always.
A little bit of background. I grew up in the eastern state of India, Bokaro Steel City. For further studies, I went to New Delhi.
Okay.
And then I studied painting at MS University, Baroda. And then I lived and worked in Pondicherry before coming here. While doing my MFA at Baroda, I did it in mural design. And I designed this 40 feet by 20 feet mural for a cinema theater. I also made the model for it. It still remains an idea. My brother Neil and sister-in-law Supriti, both architects, they live and work in Pondicherry since 1999. When I visited them, my destiny led me to meet Ray Meeker, who later became my mentor. He and his partner, Deborah Smith, came from California in 1970s, and they established Golden Bridge Pottery. I started assisting Ray at the time when he was working towards an exhibition in 2002. Ray had built a 9 feet by 9 feet by 2 feet clay sculpture in 13 parts. I was part of his help in taking these pieces, pieces apart in raw stage, in glazing, in loading and firing 9 times the 70 cubic feet car kiln, and then packing and shipping it to India Habitat Center, where it was installed in the foyer in New Delhi. Many of you are from...
Sorry, somebody, please mute your microphones so we can hear the talk clearly. Yeah.
Many of you live in New Delhi, so you might have gone to India Habitat Center and seen this work there. I joined the throwing course at Golden Ridge Pottery in 2003 and learned to make pots on the wheel. And here are some examples.
This must be your all early works.
Yes, this is my student time work. Also, I made a stamp and started to use that on a wheel stone platter. Use a slip in terms like painting. And then I got a chance to do an exhibition at Jahangir Art Gallery. And I made this series of discs called churnings, inspired by the mythological story of the churning of the oceans, drawing its parallel from the extremes in life. For example, logical and intuitive, scientific and spiritual. I find myself almost always stretched in between the two extreme poles.
Right. And this was the time when I think we got to know each other.
Yes.
Yes.
So when I did this exhibition, Sandeep had helped me a lot with the whole installation. of
It's a pleasure.
the show. And that's when I came to know Sandeep. Yes. These works are 8 kilograms of clay, which were thrown on the wheel, made into a slab, and then stretched after making textures. I continued to make work on the wheel and have exhibitions like this one at Oroville. Detail image of the piece. Some bars.
Nice.
And then I was reading Zen and I came upon this drawing of a Zen monk, which was called the universe. And I realized that if I made this into 3D, it would be the Platonic solids, which is a cube, a tetrahedron, and a sphere. And I attempted doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So in a smaller scale,
Wonderful.
with more texture.
Oh, wow.
These slabs were thrown on the wheel and then used for making a structure.
What size are these? Yeah, it's written on
14
inches. Yeah.
14 inches. So something that you can just, yeah, I don't know if you can see my hand.
Yeah.
And then it was exhibited in Baroda at ABS Gallery. And I really enjoyed tetrahedron because it is a stable form with least number of elements. And I thought that I lived a life with the basic necessities. So I related my life with tetrahedron. And I wanted to break the stiff edges of the tetrahedron to make something more organic.
Right.
So I was trying out different things with this form, but then I thought, what will happen if I press a ball of clay between my forefinger and thumb? And I didn't know what it would do, but the next day in the studio, this is what I did. And I found a form which is four-faced. This is a seed for many other forms, but I created this
Great.
tetra. The previous incarnation name for tetrarch is tetrax because it looked like an axe. But
Yes.
then I felt tetrarch was a more gentle name, so I started calling the others tetrarch. At this time, we had Peter Thompson from Australia as the resident artist at Golden Ridge Pottery, and he was an Anagama firer. So Ray and he discussed, and what used to be a climbing kiln at the place where you see this Anagama kiln was pulled down and then built as a one-chamber kiln, the Anagama. I don't think I need to go in details about the Anagama, do I?
No. If really there is a story, or we can do that as a separate story. We just brush it on the. If people have questions, they will ask again later on. That's not it.
Okay. Yeah. So just to give a quick, Anagama is a cave kiln that was used in Japan by traditional potters in Japan. And it's basically just one chamber where you put pots and the wood burns in the same chamber. Different than what we do, what I have done before, with the chamber where the pots are in a separate section and the wood burns in a separate section called the fireplace. So just it basically, you will see in the examples what happens with the Anagama. So basically it is a 200 cubic feet kiln, and we worked as a team to load and fire that.
Right.
And these are examples from there. You will notice that there's much more dramatic coloration because of the flame and ash deposit on the pots. which you might not have seen in my previous work.
That's aesthetics of Anagama. Wow. Wonderful.
Yes.
Amazing. What size these are? Again, 17 inches, 18 inches. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, 18. So just a little bigger than my root forms. These ash drips are things that we really look forward to
And
getting
then
in
in
the
the loading,
animals.
have you supported the forms by some special back supports, or how did you manage them firing? Did they had change in the form in during the firing, because Anagama firing is a longer duration of firing? How did you manage that?
Yeah, this particular form, because it doesn't have a flat base,
Yeah,
always needs a support.
correct.
And the way I put it is such that it is an arc, which kind of is on a brick or some kind of structure wadding, so that it can shrink and not crack in the middle.
Middle.
Because if this part, can you see my
Yeah,
cursor?
yeah, I can. We can.
So if this part were to be sitting as it is in the kiln, then the gravity is going to pull this point and the other point apart, and there will be a crack in the center. So you will see an image I have later in the presentation where the tetrarch is like it is placed in most firings for structure. And what you see here is where it was sitting on the support.
Right, right. Those marks can be seen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then I got scholarship from Japan Foundation, thanks to Rekha Vajpayee, because there was an exhibition which happened in Delhi, and my work. So I had an exhibition. I had some work in an exhibition in Delhi,
Right.
And somehow Japan Foundation wanted to get contact of amateur artists, and among other people, my name was suggested. And after an application process, I got the scholarship to go to Japan on the Genesis program. And I found myself at Shigaraki Ceramic Cultural Park, which is this image. The 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 ceramic center here has the research institute on the left, with the auditorium and library in that area. This central round building has the kilns as big as big bedrooms. So you can fire sculptures which are 10 feet wide and 10 feet tall and 10 feet deep. Yes. And then there was space for resident artists to live. And then on the right side is all big studios for plaster mold making, glazing, and individual artists had smaller studios to work in.
Okay.
And this whole space belongs to the ceramic part. I am standing right in front of the museum, which is also run by them. These were the works that I made there. They are fired in different kilns. And of course, I made tetrarch. You will see a lot of tetrarchs in this presentation.
That's your identity. That's your love for it. Yeah.
Thank you. And experimentation with other forms and different clays. The one of the tetrarch, and few more explorations of different forms. There is a ritual object from Indus Valley civilization called Aditi, which I had seen in a book, in a catalog of living traditions of India, which was an exhibition curated by Rajiv Sethi. And that image had stayed in my mind, and I was exploring those forms here while in Japan. And then I was lucky to make the tetrarch shape in 3 feet size. And being at the ceramic facility, there was help and there was space. So here is what I was talking about, the tetrarch being on support. So
Right.
this is how we load the tetrarch. Even when it is small, it needs to have that
Support, always.
support in the back.
Yeah.
And that's when it was done and sitting in the garden.
Wow.
And it is now part of the
Collection.
Museum. Yes.
Wow.
Moving on, I came back to India. And at that time, just around that time, my brother and sister-in-law's architectural firm, Ovoid, had moved next to Golden Bridge Pottery. So that was really very convenient. And I kept working and exploring these shapes at Golden Bridge Pottery.
Oh, wow. This is a natural flow of the ash on this?
This is the glaze, which I poured with the holding the pot on its side.
Correct.
Yet it is wood fired.
Yeah.
And then I was inspired by the different forms of seeds that you find in nature, and I made my own shapes of seeds, which also formed vases.
Right.
At that time, Ray Mihir was approached by curator Rajiv Sethi to make a ceramic garden for Hyatt Regency in Chennai. And I assisted him through the whole project. Here you might see me sitting in between that archway and filling up grout in between these pieces. This sculpture was 11 parts and fired 11 times in the bigger kiln that Ray built, which was a 140 cubic feet kiln. And I not only assisted Ray, but also had one of my work to be part of the ceramic garden. And so I was working on the 5 feet size of tetrarch. This is a whole another presentation, but I will quickly zoom through as to what went.
No, rather you can explain about how you fired, because that's a very critical thing. You can spend some or give some explanation on that, because this looks very interesting.
Okay. Well, this was my third attempt at making the tetrarch shape. The first 2 attempts, I don't have images right this minute, but they are on my website in process. If you would be interested, you can look at that.
Okay.
So the first one, even when I fired it at that angle, no, let me see. The first one, I have to show. In this image, if you can see, there is a wooden support here. Yeah. So with each piece, I made the ovoid workers, woodworkers made this support for the piece. The first bisque firing, I put the piece on bricks with this wooden structure. So what I did was I cut brick size shapes in this wooden structure and placed bricks through that. It was supporting this sculpture, but there was still some wood at the base.
Which is holding the whole structure. Yeah. Which was holding the whole structure. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was supported with bricks as well. The fire got the wood first, and that heated up the lower part of the sculpture before the upper part of the sculpture. Oh. And after the firing, there was a big crack, And when we picked it up, then it basically came apart.
Oh,
The second one, after I supported the piece with the bricks, I sawed, with help, of course, from OVOID and GPP workers, sawed away all the wood so it doesn't burn and heat up the lower part. And then the piece survived the bisque firing, survived the glaze firing, but it got a crack at a spot where it changed the shape a little bit.
okay.
So this was the third attempt, where one thing that I added was I made these holes bigger than what I made in the first go. And then these outside holes were also smaller in the previous versions and bigger in this one,
Okay.
for the heat to go in and out while the sculpture was in the kiln and firing.
Wow.
And made this support structure, which is of the same clay body as the sculpture itself, so that everything shrinks together in the kiln.
Okay.
And so there was an idea of making the structure separate and putting the sculpture on it, but I would not have got a really smooth transition between the sculpture and the support. So what we did was we created this metal structure which supported this piece, and then we turned it over to for this to be down, and I built this on top.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm doing it with my fingers, forgetting that I have to use the cursor. So this was facing down, and I built this structure. After that, this whole metal frame embraced the sculpture and the support piece, and then it was turned around to make its way into the kiln.
Okay.
And I'm spraying the final glaze onto the sculpture, and then it gets fired.
Wow.
And it still has a few cracks,
Yes.
but nothing significant. And then a fiberglass mold was made in collaboration with a fiber artist from Auroville, Balu, and it made its way onto the third floor of the building at Hyatt. And I finished installing it at 10:30 in the evening,
Nice.
and this was the next morning.
Wonderful.
And I gave a 25-minute presentation of the process of
Yes.
the failure and the challenges and the success with the Tetrarch in another conference. And that's something that we can do at some point if need be.
Yes, definitely.
So that's it. That was in 2011. And now my trail.
This was a
Okay.
support structure, right?
Yes. So that was the final piece, and this was the byproduct. But a very important one, because it really guides the work that I have done since that time. You'll see it in my work. So I will continue with the trails ahead.
Yeah.
I went to a Woodfire conference in Tasmania, where I made a lot of more tetrarchs. This is at the Punter Show, which is also can be called Delegates Show. Each participant gets a small little space on the table. You can see other people's works here and there. And yeah, these works were made at the Tin Shed Pottery. We decided if we are going to Australia, why go for a week? Go for 2 months.
Okay.
So we figured out, and we worked at Tin Shed Pottery, did the conference, and we traveled. And we also had an exhibition alongside the conference. Neil Hoffman, he was the host and the person who made, sorry?
Dukan, switch off your mic. Okay. Yeah, carry on.
Neil Hoffman hosted the conference, and Janet Mansfield inaugurated our exhibition. Madhulika Sarkar, she was the curator for this exhibition because it is of her that this happened, called Continental Drift. And three of us, Ashwini Bhatt, Aarti Veer, and myself, we were present there for that conference and, of course, the exhibition. I carried my portfolio of works, and 10 years in professional life at Pondicherry and in India, I was looking for what next I should do.
Right.
So he is Jack Troy, and I showed my portfolio to him, and I said, well, do you think I should go for a master's program? And if so, where should I go to? And he looked at my portfolio and said, well, I don't think you really need to do a master's, but if you were to go somewhere, then Utah State University would be the place.
Why is that particular place?
Because among the various universities that have great ceramic facilities in the US, Utah State University has a good number of wood firing kilns.
Right.
And all the three professors here are wood firers themselves.
Correct.
They, of course, do other styles of firing, but that's their dominant way of making work. Great. So, so that was his advice. And Dan Murphy, who's standing next to him, this is at our exhibition, is a professor at USU. So, I was suggested that I talk to him, and I went to his demo and was lucky to be able to show him my portfolio. And we started talking about me coming to Utah State University in 2011. Mm-hmm. Moving on, I also made connections with other ceramic artists in Australia and returned after a few months to Graham Wilkie's studio in Kudos, which is in southern part, south of Melbourne. He has a great space with a gallery, a cafe. He runs some tree houses, like a bread and breakfast kind of a place. And he has his huge studio, a big anagama kiln, and 2 other wood firing kilns. Incidentally, I did go there and work for 2 weeks, but he changed his plans of firings, so I moved on. Okay. I went to Robert Barron's studio called the Gooseneck Pottery, and this is what you see of his place. And I worked there to enhance my throwing skills. Oh. And of course, I find inspiration everywhere. So these flowers in that studio space were really something that kept me going. I had a deal with Robert Barron when I connected with him at the Woodfire conference that he will make his huge planters while I was there. So here you see him using what is 40 pounds, 20 kilograms of clay. He throws that part in one go. So you see 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces he made one day. And then he follows up with adding a coil and throwing again.
Okay. The Airtel number you are calling has put your...
Yep.
And then he added another coil and throwing it on the wheel. You can see the other one also growing. And then finally, in a week's time, he finishes this and applies the slip to it. Now it's raw, glazed, and ready to go. This is his 1000 CFT 4-chambered Naborigama kiln, the climbing kiln. That's the inside of the kiln without pots, and that's with pots. And the chambers behind. It took 5 days for 4 of us loading the kiln to finish loading. Each piece had to be wadded. Lots of cones. And this is at the peak of the firing, where he tips his pot to an angle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you notice this one, which is right in the front, is now facing us. It's tipped on its side. And because it's sitting on wood embers, it's almost like a pillow for the pot.
Wonderful. What is the exact difference between Anagama and Niborigama?
Anagama is a 1-chambered kiln. Naborigama is made on the same slope like the Anagama is, but it is 1 chamber, which is, has walls on either side.
Oh, okay.
And then the fire goes from underneath, and then there's another chamber, and likewise. So it's called a climbing kiln.
Climbing kiln, yeah.
In Robert Barron's kiln, he never used to put pots in this area. This was like the firebox, like I talked about, the firebox being separate than the chamber.
Right.
But at, I don't know, his 20th or 25th firing, these, the pots that were sitting in the first chamber, they rolled down onto this ember pile in the firing.
Right.
They turned out to be real gems.
Wow. So
slowly, Robert started putting pots in this area. And when I was there, it was his 53rd firing. So he knew exactly what he should put where to get really good results.
And how frequently do they fire?
He fires twice in an year.
Oh. So 50 firings is around 25 years.
Yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Beautiful.
So that was the after firing pieces still in the kiln.
Yeah.
And just another example of my work that came out of the kiln.
Oh, wow.
And then I returned to India with an intent of exploring the materials and trying to set up a studio, perhaps at my ancestral home. But that took a little bit of a time. I first built a raised design of kiln at Mandala Pottery. And for the first firing, I was there as a judicious worker. And while I was supervising the building of the kiln, I made these pots. So they got fired in this first firing. Then, like I said, my interest was to go back to my ancestral home. So that's where my home is, in close to Patna. And the first thing that I did was go and visit the village potters. And they, of course, are such amazing people. And they let me try their wheel. Of course, these are not mine. It was really hard to make pots on the traditional wheel just because I've learned how to use the kick wheel. Anyway, I got information about where to get clay. And this was one room in my home, which I turned into a studio. And basically, I had a bed table and
dual purpose.
Dual
purpose. Anyway, like carry on. Yeah.
Are you talking about these pots here?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And so got clay, prepared it, made some pots, put it in the tin, and fired it. And I didn't even get to this temperature. Anyway, I did a little bit, of traveling and for looking at bricks, brick firings. So these were images that I had from the brick kilns that I saw in the southern part of India. A closer look. And then this is what I could see from the highway on the way from city to my village home. So a big chimney which never cools down, and bricks in a ring all around being fired one part at a time.
Correct.
Sorry for this hazy image. I couldn't stop, but took this image of bricks which are being dried before they are put in the row for firing.
It looks like a cityscape. All the towers.
It does look like a cityscape. Yes, indeed. Yeah. And then with all the steel industries that are in the region, I ran into the refractory brick kiln factory. And I had learned about beehive kilns from June Kaneko's book or his article, where he uses beehive kilns to fire his monumental sculptures. If you know Jun Kaneko, if you don't know Jun Kaneko, he's a Japanese American man who makes 40 feet size clay sculptures, and they are fired in a gas fueled kiln, which are of this shape, beehive kiln.
Massive.
So, yeah, it was really surprising for me to run into a beehive kiln in India. Anyway, really exciting to see how they stack all the bricks and the flue hole and the flue channel from the chamber to the chimney is underground.
Underground, yeah.
And this round piece that you see over here is an old damper. The active one is inside there, which can be rolled to manipulate the draft in the chamber. And this is coal-fired, right? Yes, exactly. Yeah. This is coal-fired. That's their firebox. I'm coming back to my home, and there were some old mango trees that fell. So I got the wood, and I decided to make a updraft kiln, use bricks for shells, use cow dung in between, and lit it up. And my mom and dad encouraging me with all my steps. There it was fired in 4 hours.
Wow.
And that's my tiny little damper on the top. And there's inspiration everywhere. You can see civilization in these structures of cow dung preparation for for winter and for food, for cooking food. These are really intriguing and interesting for me, or at least aesthetically, I was inspired by them. Then I took down the kiln, and these were the pieces that came out from there.
Successful one.
Yeah, it did ping. Then my life brought me back to Pondicherry, and I continued my experiments with Tetrarch and firing a new Anagama kiln. This is a 80 cubic feet kiln that Ray built. And that's me pulling out one of my Tetrarchs at the peak temperature from the kiln. And this is how it looked after it was cooled down.
Interesting.
And when the kiln cooled, then this is what we saw. Again, the example of it being on supports. This one is not on the right angle support, but it has space to move. So I hope it worked out. It didn't have any cracks. And then I made many small ones too.
Wow.
continuing my explorations. And this was part of an exhibition from Golden Ridge Pottery called Evolving Traditions at NCCA in Houston, 2013. At this point, I was looking for another strong formal change in my work, and hexagons became an important, hexagons became my go-to. Just because it's a very stable structure, another stable structure like the platonic solids that I work with. And incidentally, I will show you inspiration images in the following slides. At this point, I also set up my own studio, which was part of OVOID, the architecture office, which belongs to my brother and sister-in-law. And this room was dedicated to the clay studio. And I set up the wheel, table to do hand building. And this is what you see from inside the room. And that's the kiln that I was building. I designed an 8 cubic feet kiln, and these bricks were cut on the machines that we have in OVOID. And thanks to Sandeep, I got the thermocouple and many other resources that you provided me with.
Pleasure.
And this metal structure was made at the workshop, and it has the tetrad shape too.
Yeah.
And then this was the first bisque in that kiln. And at the time, I was learning piano. And I was lucky that my teacher let me be there while the tuner came to tune the piano, and I could see the inside. And like in previous inspiration images that I would have shown you, repetition really struck me. I mean, I've seen it before, but it really struck me then. And I also found hexagonal rods which hold these wire inside the standing piano. And I have not been to Giant's Causeway. It's a dream to go there someday. But thanks to internet, that I was able to see these images from Ireland, which are amazing landscape of these split basalt rocks. And I continued making work in my studio, and this was fired in my small kiln using ash glaze. So you see all those runs. So trying to create the kind of ash drip and surface quality like you get in Anagama, but doing it in the gas kiln. So that was my resting place at OVOID Earth Art Studio. But I did residencies, and I went to Gaia Ceramic Arts Center. Marcello and Michela are the founders of Gaia, and Hillary, who's sitting on the right-hand side corner, is the director of Ceramic Arts Center. I met her at the Woodfire Conference in Tasmania, and we kept in touch and could make this residency happen. A beautiful studio, and you can see all these extruded coils are work that I was making. Oh.
Looks interesting. Wow.
This is the bottle kiln at Gaia, where my sculptures stand between two stacks of sculptures, and firing that kiln. And it is a permanent installation at their ice cream shop called Gelato, which is just up the road from where Gaia Ceramic Arts Center is.
Nice.
Shall I continue, or you have any questions, Sandeep?
Not right now. You continue, and then we'll have questions from the people, participants. Carry on.
Okay. Okay, great. So, like I said, Earth Hut and Ovoid was my resting spot, and I continued my travels. I went to assist Marcus Bohm in Germany. Um, I have interesting videos of his kiln, but not an image. But this is the biggest image that I have of his kiln chamber. He used lots of colors, and he said, "Well, I make what my customer wants." And so
Okay.
this is the work that he does. He does salt and soda,
Soda.
and he's mixing soda over here according to Gail Nichols' book and instructions. And I got introduced to Marcus by Owen Roy, whom I had met in Australia. And I just wanted to go to Germany, and I asked if I could go and work with any potter in Germany. And that's how I made that connection. And the most interesting thing, I mean, there are many interesting things, but the most interesting thing that I saw in Marcus's studio were these fish plate stands.
Yeah.
Are these available in India, Sandeep?
Yeah, with the industry, yes. Porcelain
Huh.
platter manufacturing companies, they do use this. Yeah.
Okay, so incidentally, I hadn't seen them before, and I was so intrigued by the ergonomic use of that
Yes.
with the plate stacking. Then I applied for presenting a paper at Second European Woodfire Conference in Gulliagard, Denmark. And that's me presenting the making of Tetrarch.
Yeah.
And this is outside one of the presentations. And that was where I met John Neely, who's also a professor at Utah State University. He was the keynote speaker at the conference. And anyway, I had a chat with him, and that made me to finally come here. But before that, I went to a residency in Zentrum for Ceramic in Berlin. I made a Tetrarch mold for slip casting, and I made a lot of Tetrarchs there, along with other sculptures. And Thomas is introducing me for a presentation at the end of my stay, and you can see me talking about my platonic solids. And this work was also made at Centrum for Ceramic and is installed at the Orwell Gardens in Germany, or Berlin. And like I said, my conversation with John rolled into me getting a STEM fellowship to come and do MFA here at Utah State University. And a little bit about USU ceramic program is that you can see me, I'm sorry, it's a little hazy picture, but you can see me splitting wood, something that I had not done in India ever. We have to prepare all our wood for the firings.
Yes.
There are 7 wood kilns of from size 8 cubic feet to about 150 cubic feet. There are 3 train kilns, and if you know of different types of kiln designs then and people who've designed them, then John Neely was the person who designed the train kiln. Okay. So we have 3 of those. We have a catenary arch, soda kiln, and 2 other downdraft kilns. And most recently, they have made a hybrid of anagama and train kiln. So that'll be a kiln talk when we talk about that. What you see here, this whole lighted part behind the windows, that whole space is ceramics. We have the the gas kilns and electric kilns in that part. The glaze room is over there. Wheel room and hand building space. And what you don't see, and it continues for another 40 feet towards my right on this image, is graduate spaces and clay mixing, clay storage. And all the three professors have their studios there. So that's the big ceramic facility that we have at USU. That's the picture of the medium-sized train kiln. This has a buoy box type firebox, the chamber, and the chimney. And as an MFA graduate, I have taken travel to a Gulgong conference. I was lucky to be at Janet Mansfield's studio, which was another dream come true, Morning View, which is called Morning View, which is also in Gulgong, Australia. I did a workshop by Del Harrow, who's a professor at Colorado University, State University, and that was at Anderson Ranch. Clay Art Center, another place which is really inspiring and a good place to go for artwork. Then there was a conference at Archie Bray Foundation, which I was able to attend. There's an ISKE conference, which is an educational conference, which was hosted by Bangkok University in Korea. So I got to attend that. Of course, all the NCCAs that have happened since I've been in the US. And last but not the least, I also did stone carving.
Oh.
So there's a conference which happens in Marble. It's called Marble. The place is called Marble because there's a big marble quarry in Colorado. And they do a very nice 10-day conference in summer, which I would have perhaps gone for if not for COVID this year as well. But it's a place to learn as well as make. My professor here in sculpture, Ryoichi Suzuki, he goes there and he stays for a couple of sessions to make big sculptures because it's a good dedicated time to do stone carving. Anyway, I just thought I would list it down. I didn't put images, but if you have any questions, I'm really happy to help connect,
Great.
give you answers. Yeah.
Yes, I will request the participants to ask the questions if they have any questions. One by one, they can ask the questions.
Shall I continue with the last few slides?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm in Utah, which is a cold country, temperate zone of the world.
Contrast to Pondicherry.
Contrast to Pondicherry. So snow on the mountains stay for 6 months of the year.
Wow.
And snow on the trees and the ground stay for 2 to 3 months of a year. And for anyone else, it, I don't know, might be just fine. But for a girl from tropical climate like me, it was really harsh.
I know.
Anyway, it was a huge inspiration as well. And I took it to my work.
Hey.
So I made a thesis exhibition with all white, only with light and shadows. These were mostly slip cast work. And the molds that were made for slip casting were made, there's an indirect path. So I created these forms on computer. They are 3D rendered on SOLIDWORKS, which is a program like Frino. And then there's a CNC mill, which is almost like a drill bit working on X, Y, and Z axis, which carves a plaster mold if I want that. So I have a plaster block which is carved, or I use an insulation foam which is carved. So if it is an insulation foam, then I make a plaster mold of that to be able to slip cast. And so these are slip cast pieces which were part of the thesis exhibition. And you might see remnants of Tetrarch in these works.
Yes. This looks like a state farming in Himalayas.
Yes. Yes, it's interesting that you say that. And some people over here were talking about, Oh, this is that area, that topographical area in somewhere in southern Utah.
Okay.
So it's interesting that people make
Connections.
associations
Yeah.
with what they know. And then I was a curator for a landscape project in Oroville with my ovoid architectural team. And I'm also going to share a couple of work, a set of work which I made for the first Indian ceramic trinale. So these were the pieces that were fired in the gas kiln at Utah State University. This is a 2 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet size chamber. And these pieces were put together at Ovoid and installed at Kalpana in Oroville.
Wow. Chameleon.
Yes, I thought that was a fun thing to add.
Yeah.
And this is me, just installed the work at Indian Ceramic Trinale, which happened at Jawahar Kala Kendra in Jaipur, calling it Shelter. And thanks to COVID that we are doing this Zoom, I don't have to come to Bombay for this presentation.
Rather, you are now all over India.
I'm sorry?
Now you're being seen by all Indians, all Indian potters.
Yes. Very lucky that this
COVID
can
has really
happen.
given us the opportunity to interact with the people so in detail. Wonderful.
Yes, I'm sorry that there was a delay, but I want to share these pieces that I made during quarantine.
These are in porcelain?
These are stoneware clay with celadon glazes.
Glaze. Gas fired.
Gas fired, yes.
Have you ever thought of using porcelain in wood firing for your tetrahedrons or the larger pieces?
Yes. So I don't know if you remember one porcelain piece where I have my finger with the tetrarch, holding the tetrarch. That's a porcelain from kiln, which was fired in Japan. And I am trying porcelain here in the wood kiln, but it's still experimentation. In fact, I'll be loading a kiln today with some porcelain pieces in it. Yeah. So hopefully next presentation I'll have some porcelain works from wood kiln. I do want to quickly end my part of the presentation by saying that my heart is still with the tetrarch. I do make all the other works. I'm inspired by so many things and I keep doing it. But I have come a long way, or some ways, from a pinched form to this 5-foot size sculpture. I hope someday I can bring the art and engineering together to make it 10 times the size it is.
Yes, definitely.
This
Knowing
point,
that now the way you explain the mold carving on CNC and all that, or even the 3D printing is there. So there is a possibility. Definitely there is a possibility one can do that. Good. Wonderful. And how about, like, it's totally, you want to finish furthermore?
I just want to add one sentence.
Please. Yeah.
I would like to close with a quote by Kanjiro Kawai, who said, "Man does not seek work. It is the work which waits seeking man."
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the detailed presentation. And great. I will like to ask you about what kind of preparations you need to apply for such scholarships, as you got the scholarship for your master program, because there are some students listening to this particular talk, and it will be a great help for them to understand.
So the preparation for a master's program would be, there are several aspects to it. I would say working and making so much work that you have really the best work for your portfolio is one. Making connections, either indirectly, like reaching out people whom you know, who might know other professors or members at the university, or somehow making your way through conferences. I mean, I was lucky to be at a conference and meet the professors in person, to be able um, to make it's networking, which is important. But making a personal connection helps with making this happen, or
Right.
at least in my case, that is how it has happened.
Correct. That
I
is a
know
definitely, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
know that my advisor, John Neely, says to anyone in the US who's coming to study at Utah State that they should visit the program. They should visit Utah
Yeah.
because it's a special place. It's a different state. It is not like New York or California. And the people who are in the master's program, they are going to be your cohorts. You're going to work with them.
Yeah.
So you need to see as a student um, whether you fit in the program at that time. And generally, most Americans, when they are considering to come to school here, they would visit. But that was not asked of me, of
Yeah,
course.
absolutely.
I came here and I was determined to be here. But that's, I would say, work, and whenever possible, reach out, meet people, make connections. That would help. And the application process, if for scholarships, having a good artist statement and um, a good statement of purpose. These two are also really important as to
Factors.
what your intention is when
Yes,
you're
that's right.
planning for a scholarship, a residency, or coming to the university. Um, your intent is important. So I would say three things. Mhm.
And do they have any workshops or residencies where other than the master students or anyone can apply and be part of the camp or workshops?
Yes. So, for example, the WordFire conference that I went to in Australia, it was not on, I mean, I only had an MFA, well, I mean, I had one MFA, but there are a lot of people who may not be MFAs who are joining the program, the conference, as a participant. Um, um, for uh, I'll give an example of Anderson Ranch Space Center, where I went for a workshop with Del Harrow. Uh, among the 10 people who were there for the workshop, there were 3 who were amateur artists. There were 2 who were from a scholarship from a school, so they were not even undergraduate holders. They were interested in clay, and people saw potential in them, and they got a scholarship to be part of the workshop. So I noticed that it's not necessary that you have to have an MFA to be able to join. I do want to add something which, of course, was not part of the presentation, is that wherever I go, I definitely make time to visit the museums that are there in that place. Of course, nature is very inspiring. As artists, we see nature in a different light than, many people who might just walk past by some things. And as artists, we have to show the world that there's beauty everywhere.
Yes.
But museums have something to give everyone. which is really important for any aspiring artist um, to experience. So when we talk about doing presentations, of course, there's, presentation of details of work, which is there, details of residencies. There are so many residencies and how, where, what's happening. There are universities. Yesterday, after our conversation, I had a chat with my professor, and we talked about the different types of universities that are in the US. And that's when I got to know that our university is a land grant university whose mission is to educate people. So there's no entrance exam like we had in MS University Baroda or different colleges in India. We have entrance exams. There are universities in the US who do that. You have to give a test to enter the university. But different places have different missions. So we have to just find out what fits best for us.
Yeah.
And yes, I really am so pleased to see all the faces, amazing faces that are
people after a long time. Great. So it was a nice time we had, and hope we connect you again for the different topics. Majorly, as we discussed yesterday, NCICA is another topic which is really we need to understand more in detail. So in time to come, we'll have a talk about that also. Thank you very much for your time and presentation, and have a wonderful day.
Okay, you all have a great evening and a night, and thank you so much for your patience in the beginning.
Yeah, it was something.
We tried and tested, but there's always something that has to happen. I think for us to be patient. Yes. That's what clay teaches us.
That's what clay teaches us. Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Thank
Bye.
you, Sandeep. I appreciate your contact and help. Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.